Hi guys, welcome to another video. So hope you guys are rocking today. So recently we know that there's a new president in Japan. Well, not new, it's the same, it's Abe, okay? He's the new president and also the old president. So today in this video, we will talk about the structural problems happening in Japan in the past 3 decades. That's why globally in the past decade, 2 decades, and even 3 decades, I can say most of the countries around the world, the GDP and economy has been gone up a lot or even a little bit. And I can assure that for Japan, there's almost zero growth, okay? So what are the structural problems within Japan and how does it relate to us? Because the economy of Japan and also the currency of Japan will directly related to our investment and stock markets all over the world. So, if you're new to my channel, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and also like my Facebook page. If you have any comments that would like to add into the comments, please leave me the comments in the comment box below, and also you can ask me questions, but please in the end just give me a thumbs up and share this video to your friends. So, the story starts in 1980s when an event called the Plaza Accord that started in Japan, and ever after that, Japan's economy is going downhill until now. For the past 3 decades, the economy of Japan is really bad because of that. So there lead to some kind of structural problems happening in Japan and happening right now. So the first thing is CPI, the inflation. As you can see, the inflation is flat, or you can say it's deflation. So every dollar that you earn in Japan, then the purchasing power will diminish tomorrow. That is really a big problem. So lead to what? Lead to people doing business, or lead to every people, citizen and household having a pretty much pessimistic career or future in Japan. So if you don't feel good of the future, if you're a company, you won't spend money, you won't raise the salary. So you can see the salaries in Japan has been flat for the past almost 30 years. Imagine for whatever average salary you're getting now, or a fresh grad salary that they're getting now is exactly the same in 1987. Imagine what is happening. What happened, okay? So if that's the case, the expenses that every household is making will be limited or even flat. So they're not buying things, they're not investing, the housing market is all flat, okay? That is exactly the problem. And also, there's one more structural problem because of the Japanese culture. They're really protective, so anything coming from outside, even products, technology, or people or citizens, is really hard to get to Japan. So they're more of the culture is once they have a job, more or less they're having this job for a lifetime. Of course, this culture is changing a little bit, but it's really hard for a foreigner to work in Japan. They have nothing to compare to, so the competitiveness is pretty low. That's why for the past decade, the market share of cosmetics and technology has been shared by South Korea and also China. That's exactly the case. Abe knows it. Abe knows it. So when he ever be the president in 2012 of Japan, he has the new policies. He called it the 3 arrows. Let's dig into that. So the main thing is QE, or they're using the money of the government to buy the bonds, buy the treasury bonds, buy the security bags, buy the stock market. So the thing is making the QE, or even we call it QQE or QQQE, because he's been doing many times. Until 2016, people are tired of it. Because why? It works for a while, because we see that in 2014, the CPI, the inflation, has almost hit 4%. So if the inflation is 4%, the housing market will be more than that. So usually the inflation rate is 2 to 3%, right? So the average growth of housing market is around 5 to 6%. So it's pretty good, right? But when the inflation is high, usually people will invest in housing market or invest in stock or invest in something that will grow, because the purchasing power is pretty bad, right? But the thing is, when the inflation is high, the citizens in Japan and businessmen in Japan, they do nothing. That is really weird. So that is the culture, because they still not feeling good or bright about the future of Japan. That is exactly the case. What Abe is doing, what Abe did or he's doing now is really right on track. It's about earning money. It's about the economy. But how he talks, how he's presenting himself is pretty bad. So people do not trust him anymore. That is the fact that he's doing business, but people are not trusting him. For example, many times that the policy is not doing it correctly, and he was saying something that he wasn't supposed to say, something like they have a military which called a defense military. So he proposed to change it to attack mode. So people in Japan will really against it. They say that the military is for protection, it's not to fight. But in economy-wise, just like Donald Trump, they are doing something to gain up the army and military. That is exactly how a country has bargaining power. But it's something that they will not talk on TV and in the shows, but is directly correlated to their power and to their military size. So he's doing something right, but not something that the Japanese will like. He also had another crisis because of the population problem. So we can see there's a population in Japan of male and female. So as you can see, the age range that most people in Japan is about 40 years old and below 70 years old. The highest percentage is 65 to 69 years old. So people in Japan, either they're retired or going to retire. So as you can see, the teenagers and younger people that has more hours and more labor hours, they're really shrinking. As you can see, the worst is 0 to 4 years old is almost close to nothing, only 2% of Japan. So that means if he is not doing something right or he's not doing something now, the bad economy of Japan will continue for at least 2 decades. So he is doing something right. He's asking Japanese to have more children, but again, if you don't feel right about the future, again, they will not have kids, right? So he's doing something else. He has loosened big time for the immigration policy. It's really a historic record attempt. So he is doing that, and by the time in 2016, the immigration has speed up by 150,000 people. So compared to the shrinking population of Japan of 300,000 people per year, is at least filling in a half of this problem. But again, also because of the population is shrinking, imagine why the housing market, the price will go up, right? Because the demand is declining and the supply is still there, the housing market will not go up at all. So that is exactly what he's doing right now in his attempting. But if you are Japanese, will you agree to that? No, right? Because you're asking foreigners to come into Japan and take away my market share, take away my job, and take away my salary, right? That is exactly the conflict and the dilemma that Abe has to face right now. But he's doing something right. So right now, we know that he's the new president of the Japan. Not that he's strong, it's because his component is really weak. And also, he's purposely re-elected himself 1 year before the deadline. So before people are ready, he said, let's go do the election. Just something like Theresa May. But Theresa May has sort of failed, but he's really big time success, okay? So now the new policies, let's see if he's doing it right, and if it's doing right, the economy of Japan or 2019 will be doing really good. And just like before, we know that the 3 arrows are launched in 2012, and the economy turns really good in 2014, but the stock market has gone up the most for 80%. Japanese stock market is 2013. And because also the currency is really cheap and investing cost is pretty low, so that led to 2015 a big boom in global stock market. So that is directly what will impact our investment. So recently he has mentioned that he will take bold measure to speed up the economy of Japan again. So including an 18 billion US dollar to put into economy, such as focusing on education and also the aging and the elderly care problem. So why is he doing some policy of elderly? Because he's just a businessman, right? So in the end, he's not doing something for no purpose. Because every year, around 100,000 people per year, they're quitting their job just to take care of the elderly because they have no money to hire anyone, so they have to do it themselves. So they have less participation rate of people working in Japan, right? So that is a big problem. So if they have a more productive elderly caring proposal or policies, so those people may not quit their jobs. And that's again, more people work, more money and they will more chance spending in investing in housing market. That is a cycle. That is a cycle that he has to break. And also, he's going to launch gambling industry in Japan, which is, again, people dislike it. But again, in economy-wise, it's the correct way to do. But again, I against gambling, but that's really about business. The third thing, again, they raised the consuming tax from 5% to 8% to now 10%. So would it harm the Japanese? No, because they're not buying anything, right? Just people going to Japan and spend money. And now, spending money, I will tax you more. And also, before you leave, I will tax you again. And also, within you come and before you leave, you go gamble. And I also profit again. So that is his plan. And again, it's right, but it's somehow not right to the citizens and Japanese, and something is not ethical, but it's not something that we should measure. It's something that Abe has to do his homework in order to persuade the citizen to do the same. Because after all, he's tried to help the economy, and the inflation has gone up to almost 4%. But it didn't last because people still did not trust Abe. That is the key, what he's going to do. So let me prove that how the policies in Japan and the currency in Japan will directly affect the stock markets. So I use a special code for this homework. It's called CASHF. It's somehow like the Japanese policy and the Japanese currency. So we have the dependent variables of S&P 500, Hang Seng Index Hong Kong, the Japanese Nikkei 225 index, then also the Dow Jones index, and as well as the Germany DAX index. So that are the samples. So if you can see a positive correlation, that means they're correlated. If you can see a 0.3 to 0.5, that is highly correlated. So as you can see, the NKY is the Nikkei index, is 0.6 is the highest. So we know that, right? The Japanese policy and the currency will directly influence the investing cost, so people will invest in the Japanese market. So we know that. But if that's 0.6, imagine S&P 500 and Dow Jones Index, they are 0.533 and 0.53. It's really highly correlated, right? So again, we prove that the policy and what he's talking weekly would directly related to the stock market, in even the housing market in general, in the economy. So it's something that we have to invest. So of course, you can open the chart, you can do homework for your countries, but let's now talk about the Nikkei 225 index. Because recently it has broken the new high again. So right now it's around 22,000 points, and now we see that as long as it doesn't break below the 21,000 level, we do not have to sell this index. So this index technically and fundamentally is pretty good. So the first little target we can set 22,600 points. And if he is doing something correctly, the key is if he can persuade the citizens, then people really started trusting him, and the stock market will go before the economy turns good, okay? It's always leading, right? The stock market is always leading. Then 22,600 is really only the first target. So how should we invest in this? First of all, as we can see, other stock markets are highly correlated with the Japanese stock market and currency. But if you want to directly invest in the stock market, you can invest in the ETFs. So in the chart, you can see there are two highest volume turnovers of the ETFs, so that the liquidity of the ETFs will be really good. So the correlation of the ETF against the Japanese index will be the highest. So as you can see, the first one is EWJ, the second one is DXJ. That's not leverage, that's 1-to-1 ratio. But as you can see, the highest volume is DXJ. But the ETF that has highest correlation is EWJ. So given the volume is the second highest, but the volume is still not too low, but the correlation is extremely high. It's around 0.8-ish to 0.9. It's really highly correlated. So you do not want to invest in an ETF that is not correlated with the index that you want to invest. And in the end, you do the right homework, but the result fall short. That is something that we avoid. So DXJ is what I suggest if you want to invest in Japan. So that's basically my update. This video is something that to prove that Japanese and Abe, what he's talking weekly, will directly influence the economy, housing market, and stock market in the index. And also, given that you're not investing at all, no problem. So right now, after this video, you have more in your brain. So if you start a conversation with your friends, it becomes pretty cool, right? So two main purposes. So hopefully, give me thumbs up and share this video to your friends. And I know this is a bit difficult, so please add it to watch later so you can watch later and drop stock looks again. So I'll continue doing it as long as you like this video. So I will continue doing it because our purpose is investing made easy. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.